We are, well, high achievers, aren't we? We spend years, sometimes, decades, focused almost obsessively on this single, really tangible metric, the financial independence number, that magic figure that just sits there at the bottom of the spreadsheet. We run the projections, we optimize the savings rate, we dream about that specific moment we hit send, the resignation email.
Believing that number is the goal, the finish line.
Exactly. Believing that hitting that calculation somehow equals happiness, I guess.
It's the classic dream, isn't it? That once the money side is sorted, everything else just falls into place. Fulfillment, happiness, it just appears.
Yeah.
But what actually happens the day after you hit that number? When the money's secure, sure, but suddenly you've got 60, maybe 80 hours of totally empty, unstructured time each week staring you in the face.
That's a terrifying thought, actually.
It is. And look, this isn't just some modern FIRE community issue. It's a really fundamental human challenge, something that even titans of industry recognize, people who reach the absolute pinnacle of success.
You're thinking of that Lee Iacocca quote, aren't you?
Yeah.
The one that's just so central to this whole discussion.
Exactly right. Mr. Lee Iacocca, former chairman of Chrysler, a guy who absolutely climbed the mountain. And he gave this incredibly powerful warning. He said, you plan everything in life, and then the roof caves in on you because you haven't done enough thinking about who you are and what you should do with the rest of your life.
Wow. Yeah. For anyone listening who's a high performer, that quote, it should land like a punch to the gut.
Right.
It completely reframes the entire mission. We're taught how to manage our assets, our spreadsheets, our investments, but we never learn how to manage our time or, crucially, our identity once that career structure just vanishes.
And that's the core insight, really, for this deep dive. Financial freedom. It's not the destination. It's just the vehicle. It gives you optionality. It's like a permission slip to live a life you actually direct yourself. But, and this is the big but, optionality without a really deeply thought out purpose, that's what leads to that psychological crash. That thing the FIRE community talks about, the post-FI void. You've successfully removed all the external structures, the metrics, the job titles, but you haven't built anything internal to replace them.
So welcome everyone to Project FIRE. Today we're doing a deep dive into a topic we're calling Beyond the Numbers, Finding Purpose Before and After FI.
Yeah.
Our mission here is to really move beyond the usual talk about portfolio allocation and withdrawal rates. We want to get into the guts of lifestyle design, the psychological prep work that's absolutely necessary for, true sustainable freedom. We're focusing squarely on how you can design a life that's actually so fulfilling, so engaging, that you don't even need to quit your job, but you have the total financial confidence that you absolutely can.
That's the sweet spot.
So if you've been grinding really hard, maybe delaying life, putting things off based on some assumed finish line way out in the future, well, this exploration into non-financial preparation, honestly, it might be the most important work you could do right now.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's really try to unpack just the sheer magnitude of the change retirement brings. Quitting a career you've maybe had for decades, it's not just tweaking your budget. It involves these profound, sometimes really quite traumatic psychological and social shifts. And I think almost everyone fundamentally underestimates this.
Completely. We focus so hard on what we gain, freedom, that we forget to actually account for what we lose in the process.
Right.
And the scale of what's lost beyond just the paycheck, it's actually staggering. We've sort of identified 5 key non-financial elements that work provides, things that can just vanish almost overnight the second you walk out that door for the last time.
And it's losing these sort of invisible pillars that causes the crash, right?
That's exactly it, yeah.
Okay, so let's detail those, maybe the 4 big non-financial ones first, because I think understanding this list is really step 1 in figuring out how to replace them.
Absolutely. So the first one is arguably the most powerful. Role and identity. Your job title, chief engineer, director of marketing, senior, whatever. It's more than just words on a business card, right? It acts as a kind of shorthand for your social status, your expertise, maybe your contribution to society, often the community you belong to. Sources like Forbes really stress that for high achievers especially, losing that title feels like losing a really significant integrated part of who you are, your core self.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. When you meet someone new, what's often the first question?
What do you do?
Exactly. And suddenly that simple, everyday question becomes this huge existential hurdle you have to navigate.
Precisely. Okay, so the second element is structure. Work gives you mandated activities, deadlines. It organizes your time.
Mhm.
Your week is basically scheduled for you by these external forces.
Right.
Once you retire, poof, that schedule evaporates. And you have to recreate that structure entirely on your own, which, believe me, a lot of retirees find shockingly difficult.
I can imagine. Okay, what's third?
Third is relationships. For a lot of people, the workplace is their main social hub. Their colleagues, clients, business contacts. Those are the people they interact with daily. Once you leave, those ties often fray really quickly. And that causes this dramatic shift in your primary social support network. It can be quite isolating.
Yeah, that makes sense. And the fourth?
Fourth is accomplishment or sense of worth. That feeling you get from being productive, hitting targets, achieving goals, contributing something useful to a bigger organization or the economy. We seem to be wired to feel useful, and work provides a very clear, even if it's sometimes unsatisfying, measure of that utility.
Okay, and the fifth is the obvious one.
Is the paycheck, the only purely financial element on that list.
So if you just look at that list again, identity, structure, relationships, worth, it's entirely non-monetary.
Right.
It suddenly makes perfect sense why people can experience these really profound feelings of like grief and disorientation when they leave a career that was so central to their sense of self. It really is like mourning the loss of a previous version of you, the person who wore that professional mask.
That analogy of grief is incredibly accurate. The sources that detail this transition, they emphasize that this identity loss often shows up in subtle ways, insidious ways. People might confuse it with just being bored.
Like what?
Like a nagging emptiness, maybe a quiet but persistent unease, sometimes withdrawing socially, a real lack of self-directed motivation, or even, in some cases, clinical depression.
Wow.
And the crucial first step, really, to combating this void is just acknowledging that these feelings are a natural, predictable response to a massive life change. It's not some personal failure on your part. It's usually a failure of preparation.
I think we need to pause on the data here for a second, because this isn't just, anecdotal stuff shared on fire forums. Research actually confirms this identity crisis is a major, widespread challenge.
Oh, absolutely. Retirement fundamentally challenges your self-identity. It forces those, what researchers call the fundamental existential questions.
Like, who am I?
Exactly. Who am I if I'm not a lawyer anymore, or an accountant, or a coder? Research published by Skeena and Osborne found this is really common, and their data point is pretty sobering. Over 25% of recent retirees specifically struggled with their self-identity or their sense of purpose or meaning in life after retiring.
1 in 4. That's a huge percentage. These are successful people who executed the financial plan perfectly, but then completely failed the life plan.
Yeah.
Why? Why do high achievers, people who excel at planning complex financial strategies, why do they fail so spectacularly at planning for their own happiness?
I think it's because we tend to treat purpose as sort of an optional extra, something you just pick up at the finish line after you've dealt with the important stuff, the money stuff.
Right.
Instead of seeing it as a mandatory component of the entire strategy right from the start. We assume that the same external motivation that drove our career success, money, status, promotions, we assume, that will somehow magically translate into internal fulfillment. But it almost never does.
So we need an internal driver, not an external one.
Exactly. You need an internal mandate.
Which I guess brings us back to structure. Losing that worker role means losing the mandated schedule, the daily ritual of getting up, getting ready, going somewhere. That disruption to just your basic routine is huge.
It is. We really underestimate how much of our mental energy is simply saved by having our time organized for us.
Yeah.
And this is where a successful transition really hinges on intentional effort. Skeena's research highlights the absolute necessity of developing new habits, new roles, new activities, and doing it urgently.
Urgently. Why urgently?
Because roles, habits, routines, they help organize your time, your resources, your mental energy. They provide stability. They basically create the container for your new life. Without that container, things can unravel pretty quickly.
Is there proof that actively replacing those roles actually works? Does the data back that up?
Yeah, the proof is definitely in the data. When they surveyed retirees, a staggering 79% specified that actively engaging in new roles and activities, whether that was taking up a serious hobby, doing some consulting, becoming a full-time volunteer, it significantly helped preserve their sense of identity in retirement.
79%. Wow.
It's huge. You could almost call it identity insurance.
That finding really suggests we need to start thinking about our hobbies, our commitments outside of work, not as distractions from the main goal of FI, but as essential identity insurance that you have to buy and keep current.
It really does. I'm reminded of this quite poignant quote from one of the participants in the Skeena study, someone who was really struggling with the sudden radical freedom. They said, "I had to examine my rules for myself. You can't watch reality TV all day. You should be doing something productive."
That perfectly illustrates the difficulty of self-direction, doesn't it?
Totally. When you remove the external authority, the boss, the deadlines, the project plans, you have to become the source of your own authority, your own structure, your own accountability.
And if you haven't practiced that muscle, if your entire adult life was basically dictated by the external schedule of a job or corporation, that freedom could very quickly become a really heavy burden.
Exactly right. Retirees essentially have to become their own CEO, their own HR department, their own project manager, their own scheduler, all rolled into one.
Yeah.
They have to actively create that structure and focus to replace the external schedule of work. Otherwise, all that wonderful optionality you worked so hard for, it can rapidly decay into a kind of decision paralysis and inertia.
You can have all the financial freedom in the world.
But if you don't have the internal structure, the internal why, to actually use it, you're like a rich ship drifting without a rudder.
Okay, so here's where we pivot a bit towards the solutions, maybe the more hopeful side. And this is where I think it gets really interesting, especially for the FIRE audience listening. We often see followers of this movement kind of adhering to what's sometimes called the death march approach.
The grind.
Yeah, the grind, delaying life, putting off meaningful travel, expensive hobbies, maybe even spending on health and wellness, and just using these aggressively high savings rates to race full throttle to that finish line number, believing all the good stuff, all the happiness lives on the other side of that number.
And you know what? This is the part of the journey that's most often cited as a major regret by people who've actually achieved early FI.
Really?
Oh, yeah. The collective wisdom from successful early retirees is overwhelmingly clear. Viewing the FI journey as this rigid, all-or-nothing race is profoundly unhealthy and often unnecessary.
So freedom isn't just a switch you flip when your spreadsheet hits $2 million.
Not at all. Freedom is a resource you gain incrementally along the way. And that optionality, that growing freedom, it enables critical lifestyle design now, long before you hit the traditional FI number.
We've heard those stories, haven't we?
Yeah.
People like the Fineers or Carl from 1500 Days. They achieved massive financial success, but then look back and wish they'd gone a bit slower.
Right.
Use their vacation time fully, maybe taking those big once-in-a-lifetime trips they could have easily afforded but skipped, all in the name of aggressive portfolio growth.
That's exactly the cost of delayed life. They realize, often too late, that time is finite. And the current time, especially time when you're in peak physical health or when your kids are young, that time shouldn't be squandered solely chasing a savings number that might only be, say, 5 or 10 years away anyway. And furthermore, when they look back, they often realize that their ideal life, once the initial burnout subsided, actually included some form of meaningful work. Yeah. Many regret not transitioning sooner to work they genuinely enjoyed, even if it meant earning less, maybe just a small income. The real destination wasn't necessarily the end of all work, but the freedom to choose the work, the amount of work, on their own terms.
Okay, so let's break down that pathway then, because recognizing these different milestones gives you optionality long before you hit that full FI number. If we view the journey as a series of, empowering plateaus, how do these 5 stages of financial freedom grant increasing levels of control over your life and your lifestyle design?
Okay, so let's start at the beginning, and these stages are generally cumulative. The first, and often the most psychologically relieving for people, is debt freedom. And we're defining that here as having no high-interest consumer debt. So credit cards, student loans, car payments, maybe beyond a low-interest mortgage.
Right, getting rid of that crushing consumer debt.
Exactly. Eliminating that dramatically reduces your required monthly expenses, which immediately lowers your survival income floor.
So, okay, even if you're nowhere near FI, you've immediately gained some optionality right there.
Absolutely.
Your existing income goes further. You gain the choice maybe to take a job that pays less, but you find more enjoyable or less stressful, or maybe it offers more flexibility. It's like the first step in buying back your time.
Exactly right. Okay, stage 2 is the famous FU money.
Ah, yes.
This is having enough liquid funds, maybe in an emergency fund, or easily accessible investments so you can confidently walk away from a toxic job, or renegotiate for better terms, more flexibility, or even just handle a painful living situation without financial panic setting in.
And you mentioned earlier there's a critical psychological component here, too. FU money isn't just the dollar amount.
No, it's not. It has to be combined with the feeling of freedom. You need to internalize the security your savings provide, otherwise you'll never actually feel empowered enough to use that leverage. It's a psychological safety net, not just a number on a statement.
Okay, makes sense. Moving up the continuum.
Moving up, we hit a really motivating phase, Coast FI. This is where the game really fundamentally changes. Coast FI means you have enough invested today that your portfolio, just through growth, will reliably grow even if you stop contributing another penny today to cover a comfortable traditional retirement, let's say at age 60 or 65.
Wow. So when you hit Coast FI, essentially the pressure just vanishes.
Pretty much. Your future self is basically taken care of. Suddenly, your active income only needs to cover your current living expenses. Any future savings can go towards accelerating early retirement, sure, but maybe even better, towards lifestyle improvements right now.
Can you imagine the freedom that provides? Like, give us an example.
Okay, let's use the one from the source material. Say you're 30 years old, you spend about $40,000 a year, and you plan to retire traditionally at 60. You'd only need around $160,000 invested today to hit Coast FI.
Only 160K. That feels achievable for many people earlier than they think.
It often is, and once you're there,
Yep.
you can scale back dramatically. You could shift to part-time work. You could work intensely for 6 months and take 6 months off. You could take a lower-paying job you absolutely love, knowing your eventual safety net is already building itself in the background. This stage fundamentally changes employment from a necessity to a choice.
That's huge. Okay, after that big plateau, what's next?
Next up is semi-retirement. This is where your portfolio is large enough that its passive income covers a significant, reliable majority of your annual expenses, but you still need a small income supplement to cover the gap.
Okay, so think about the lifestyle design possible there.
Right. Let's say you have maybe $1 million invested. Using a safe withdrawal rate, that might allow you to safely draw, say, $35,000 to $40,000 per year. If your total annual expenses are $50,000, you only need to earn an extra $10,000 to $15,000 a year.
Which is not very much.
Exactly. That small amount could easily be earned through a passion project you love, a fun side hustle, maybe some very light consulting in your old field. This kind of lifestyle lets you spend the vast majority of your time doing things you genuinely love, maybe deep travel, complex hobbies, extensive community work.
While still having that financial security. Okay. And then finally, we arrive at the classic finish line. The goal on basically every FIRE spreadsheet.
Full financial independence. Yes. This is the point where your passive income completely covers all your living costs. You have total sovereignty over your time.
But here's the crucial realization, isn't it? The thing that often shocks people who are racing towards this final stage.
It is. The only lifestyle design option that is truly unique to this final stage is the ability to retire and never work for income again.
Right.
All the other amazing optionality, working part-time, negotiating for total flexibility, taking a year-long sabbatical or mini retirement, shifting to a low-paying passion job, all of that was actually available sooner, at the Coast FI or semi-retirement stages.
So if your real goal is a fulfilling life now, maybe you shouldn't be focused solely on that final distant finish line.
Precisely. You might be able to unlock huge chunks of freedom and happiness much, much sooner.
Okay. Let's just pause for a moment there and let that sink in, that whole continuum. We really hope this deep dive is helping you maybe fundamentally rethink your path to freedom, not as some distant, lonely mountain peak you have to race towards, exhausted,
Right.
but more like a series of empowering plateaus, milestones you can leverage to buy back your life and start designing your fulfillment today. This isn't just abstract theory. This is literally the difference between maybe achieving burnout versus achieving actual happiness.
Well said.
So if this discussion is making you rethink your maybe overly aggressive timeline or just your definition of what success looks like for you, we genuinely want to hear about it. Please take a moment right now, hit that like button on this deep dive. Definitely subscribe to Project FIRE for more essential strategies like this one, and make sure you hit that notification bell so you never miss the wisdom that helps you design a better life starting today?
Okay, so we really need to shift our internal accounting system now. Move away from just the financial ledger and onto the, let's call it the life
Oh,
ledger.
I like that, the life ledger.
Yeah. Retirement or any major career transition really involves massive changes socially, psychologically, relationally. So focusing only on the financial adjustments, it's just plain insufficient if you want a satisfying and fulfilling transition.
Okay, but does this non-financial preparation actually work? I mean, do we have hard data to support the idea that planning for purpose gives you a measurable return on happiness?
We absolutely do, and the correlation is exceptionally strong. The General Social Survey, the GSS, they conducted some really extensive research on retirement satisfaction, and they found that almost three-quarters of retirees, 71% to be exact, had made at least one or more non-financial preparations before they left the labor force.
Okay, so most people do something, but what's the real insight? Does it actually make a difference?
That's where it gets compelling. It's all in the outcomes. The GSS data is pretty conclusive on this. The predicted probability of enjoying life more after retirement. Well, it was a kind of concerning 43% for those folks who made absolutely zero non-financial preparation. None at all.
Less than a coin flip chance of being happier. Yikes.
Yeah, but that probability rose sharply. It increased by nearly 16 percentage points, up to 59% for those who made at least three non-financial preparations.
Wow. Okay. So that's a massive quantifiable difference in actual satisfaction. And it correlates directly not to the size of their 401k,
Nope.
but to the amount of purposeful life planning they did beforehand.
Exactly. Preparation truly predicts enjoyment.
That is really compelling evidence. It suggests planning your life architecture, your non-financial life, might actually be a higher priority than squeezing out that last 1% return in your investment portfolio.
I would argue it absolutely is for long-term fulfillment.
Okay, so let's unpack this non-financial preparation then. What exactly are the specific levers we should be pulling now, maybe long before we even think about retiring?
Right. So the GSS identified 4 key preparation activities that seem to make the most significant difference. The most common one, which about 46% of retirees did, was gathering information about retirement.
Okay, so doing the homework.
Exactly. Formal planning, talking with consultants, maybe attending financial or lifestyle planning courses, deliberately studying what this next phase of life might look like.
That makes sense, especially for high achievers. I mean, if you were going to transition into a massive new role or career, you'd study it, right?
You would hope so.
And retirement is potentially the longest phase of life. We might spend 30, even 40 years there. So why wouldn't we dedicate serious study to mastering it?
It seems logical, yet it's often overlooked in the rush to hit the number. Okay, the second key preparation, cited by about 35% of retirees, was cultivating hobbies and leisure pursuits.
Ah, the fun stuff.
Well, yes, but importantly, activities that renew you, rejuvenate you, and require some deep engagement. This is critical because other survey data from the Employee Fitness Report, or EFR, showed a massive vulnerability here. 41% of retirees they polled reported being bored.
21%, that's huge.
It underscores the urgent need for intrinsically engaging activities to fill that time void left by the structure of work.
So if your only real hobby today is, I don't know, scrolling social media or watching Netflix, and you're just waiting until you're retired to suddenly pick up, say, woodworking or learn Japanese, you're probably setting yourself up for that pervasive post-FI boredom we talked about.
Almost guaranteed. You need to develop hobbies that demand focus and skill now. Build the muscle.
Okay. What was the third area?
The third area, reported by about 29% of retirees, was involvement in volunteer activities. Sources like CINA noted that women were slightly more likely to volunteer, around 31% versus 26% for men.
And why is volunteering so critical?
Because this non-work facet is absolutely crucial. Volunteering provides an immediate replacement role. It helps preserve your identity, and it maintains that critical sense of worth and purpose, totally independent of any professional achievement or salary. It directly replaces that need to feel useful.
Got it. And the fourth preparation activity?
The fourth category was becoming involved in physical activities, which about 27% of respondents noted. The GSS found this was strongly associated with a greater enjoyment of life after retirement.
That makes sense. Health is wealth, as they say.
Well, yeah. And given that your retired life might be quite extensive, proactively investing in your holistic wellness, physical, mental, spiritual, it's just a necessary foundation. If your body or your mind limits what you can do post-FI, your optionality shrinks dramatically, regardless of your portfolio size.
I appreciate how this research kind of pivots the conversation away from purely self-focused achievement, like hitting the number, and towards contribution. Once we are financially secure, how do we make that mental shift from seeking external validation and achievements to finding that deeper internal fulfillment through contribution? It feels like a very different psychological muscle.
It really is. It requires flipping the script on scarcity thinking. According to frameworks like those discussed by Chris Wilson, contribution, whether that's your time, your money, or your knowledge, is absolutely vital to living what he calls a life of abundance.
How does that work? How does giving lead to abundance?
Well, the act of giving itself creates this profound belief in your own mind that you already have enough. It fuels that essential abundance mentality because you're acting from a position of surplus, not deficit. You wouldn't give it away if you didn't feel on some level that you had it to give.
That's a fascinating psychological feedback loop. So giving creates the internal feeling of abundance, which maybe, ironically, can then lead to actual growth in other areas like money or health or freedom.
Exactly. And the key here isn't the quantity of the gift initially, it's the habit of contribution. It doesn't matter if you give $5 or $500 or volunteer 1 hour a month. The point is to build the muscle of contributing something, even something small, today. Don't wait until some distant, perfect future when you think you'll magically have more.
Yeah, because for many high earners, waiting for that perfect time to give often means never really giving consistently, right? Because their expenses tend to scale up right alongside their income. Lifestyle creep.
Precisely. And when we talk about contributing financially, people often think, oh, my small contribution is meaningless compared to, Bill Gates or huge foundation.
Right, the fallacy of scale.
Exactly. But in reality, individuals, just regular people contributing relatively small amounts, they actually make up over 70% of all organizational contributions in many countries.
70%. Wow.
It demonstrates the massive collective power of individual giving. Your contribution absolutely matters. And starting that habit now really fuels your sense of purpose for the future. It helps ensure your identity gets tied to generosity and contribution, not just accumulation. #tag VO. Finding meaning and structure through flow.
Okay, so we know the traditional structure of a job just disappears the day we retire or leave that career. So we need highly effective, deeply engaging activities in our new life, things that are intrinsically motivating, pursuits that are so compelling we literally forget about time entirely.
Right, we need something to replace that mental engagement.
And this is where that powerful psychological concept of flow really provides a blueprint for finding fulfillment, right?
Absolutely. Flow provides that deep mental engagement, that focus, that challenge that's necessary to replace what many of us actually get from demanding professional work, even if we don't always enjoy the work itself. We're diving here into the landmark work of the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
I hope I'm saying that right.
Close enough. He pioneered the study of the flow state, sometimes called optimal experience.
Okay, so for listeners who might not be familiar with the term flow, how did Csikszentmihalyi actually define this optimal experience, and why is it so vital for our happiness?
So flow is defined as a psychological state. It's characterized by intense, focused concentration, optimal enjoyment, full involvement in the activity, and this deep intrinsic interest. When you're in flow, your output just seems to, flow easily. Your inner critic goes quiet, and your perception of time shifts dramatically. Hours can feel like minutes.
Yeah.
And Csikszentmihalyi's key insight was that people find the deepest, most lasting happiness, not in passive leisure, like just sitting on a beach or purely relaxation, but in these intense moments of being deeply engaged and challenged by an activity they've chosen.
That sounds like a perfect replacement for the extrinsic rewards of work, like promotions or bonuses. We're essentially replacing external achievements with powerful internal fulfillment.
Exactly. But what's actually happening in our brains when we achieve this state? Is it just a feeling, or is there science behind it?
Yeah, what's the biology?
Oh, the neuroscience behind it, detailed in sources looking at productivity and freedom. It's truly fascinating. As we enter flow, our brains experience something called transient hypofrontality.
Transient hypofrontality. Okay, break that down.
Basically, the energy-draining, highly conscious part of our brain, specifically an area called the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for things like judgment, self-monitoring. That nagging inner critic, it temporarily deactivates or quiets down significantly.
So the inner voice that's usually judging us, worrying about the future, second-guessing our choices, it just goes quiet.
Pretty much. That conscious filtering mechanism gets disabled, and it allows faster, more efficient subconscious thinking to take over. This is why people report that profound sense of effortlessness and creativity during flow. They're no longer fighting their internal editor.
Wow, okay. Beyond just silencing the inner critic, what are the immediate benefits, like in terms of brain chemistry?
Flow states release this really potent cocktail of pleasure-producing neurochemicals. We're talking endorphins, serotonin, and crucially, dopamine and norepinephrine.
Okay.
Dopamine enhances focus and attention, while norepinephrine acts like a stimulant. These chemicals together dramatically enhance our attention, our pattern recognition, our lateral thinking, which are sometimes called the three horsemen of rapid-fire problem solving.
Yeah.
And this burst of positive neurochemistry reinforces the behavior. It makes you want to do the activity again. It feels good.
Okay, so if we want to harness this power in our post-FI lives, or even now, we need a reliable recipe for getting into that state. What are the key ingredients? The components required for an activity to reliably induce flow.
Right. Csikszentmihalyi outlined 8 necessary components of flow, but importantly, the first 3 are considered mandatory preconditions. They must exist for the state to even be possible.
Okay, number 1.
First, clearly defined goals with immediate feedback. You need to know exactly what you're trying to achieve at every single moment. And the task itself has to immediately signal whether you're succeeding or failing. Think about learning a complex piece of music or playing a video game or even rock climbing. The feedback is instant.
That makes sense. Work often provides that through, targets or project milestones. So in retirement, we need to consciously design activities that are similarly structured and measurable, like mastering a specific complicated recipe maybe, or trying to beat your personal best time in running.
Exactly. Okay, second mandatory component, a high level of focus on a specific topic. The task has to be complex enough that it requires your total dedication of attention. It needs to crowd out all those external worries or distractions.
Got it. And the third mandatory element, you said this one is often the hardest for people to get right.
It is. It's the real linchpin. A balance between challenges and skills. The activity must be difficult enough to require your full concentration and push your boundaries just a little. But it must not be so overwhelmingly difficult that it causes stress, anxiety, or just sheer frustration.
Right. So if I try to, learn quantum physics from scratch tomorrow with zero background, I'm just going to hit frustration and quit immediately.
Correct.
But I've spent 2 hours just reading super basic articles I already understand. I'll probably get bored. So the key is finding that sweet spot, just slightly beyond your current capability.
Precisely. That's the zone for peak learning and peak engagement. The remaining 5 components, they describe more the subjective experience of being in flow. So these include things like a profound sense of control over the activity, a feeling of effortlessness in the execution, that fundamental change in time perception where time either speeds up or slows down, the integration of consciousness and action, that feeling of being totally absorbed, losing yourself in it, and finally, an intrinsic motivation. You do the task because you genuinely love it, not for some external reward or recognition.
That list provides an incredible framework. You could use it to evaluate potential post-FI activities or even current hobbies. Now, for the listener who's thinking, okay, I want to apply this concept, start structuring a more fulfilling post-FI life, or even just make my current life better, how do they practically start integrating flow now? How do they build that muscle before they actually quit their job?
Okay, we can outline several really actionable steps based on the research. First, and maybe most obviously, you have to focus on what you love to do. Getting into flow is inherently easier when the activity is intrinsically enjoyable for you. If you hated math class your whole life, don't force yourself to do advanced calculus just because it's challenging. Identify activities where you already naturally lose track of time. What absorbs you?
That's foundational, yeah. If you despise hiking, forcing yourself to complete the entire Appalachian Trail isn't going to induce flow. It's just going to induce self-imposed misery.
Exactly. Okay, second, actively make the task challenging, yet not too difficult. Find that sweet spot. If you're learning guitar, don't just strum the same 3 chords forever. Challenge yourself to learn a tricky solo that requires incremental practice. You have to actively adjust the difficulty level to maintain that critical balance we talked about.
Okay.
Third, recognize and leverage your peak productivity times. Figure out when your brain is naturally most alert, most focused, most disciplined, your personal chronotype. Are you a morning person? A night owl? And then dedicate that sacred time slot to your deep, flow-inducing work, whether that's writing, coding, gardening, studying, complex model building, whatever it is for you. Protect that time.
And given how easily we get pulled in a million directions today, especially with phones and notifications, avoiding interruptions must be absolutely crucial for flow.
Oh, completely. You must avoid distractions rigorously. Flow requires total, unbroken focus, which means you probably need to consciously engineer your environment.
Like how?
Well, it might mean having a dedicated workspace, closing the door, using noise-canceling headphones, maybe using apps or website blockers to keep yourself off social media and other known time wasters during that focus block. And finally, establish a ritual.
A ritual? Like what?
Create some custom actions. It could be listening to a specific playlist, doing a short 5-minute meditation beforehand, lighting a particular candle, making a specific type of tea, whatever works for you. Actions performed consistently right before you start to signal to your brain, okay, it's time to focus now, time to enter flow mode. This ritual acts as a trigger, and it can actually reduce the cognitive effort needed to just get started on the focused work. Hashtag VSDI. Key strategic questions for non-financial preparation.
So designing this life after FI, it requires accepting that change is just constant. Retirement might end up being the longest stage of our lives, and it involves continuous adaptation, especially as we move past, say, age 60, where major life changes often seem to accelerate health changes, family changes, moving.
Absolutely.
So the capacity to manage that continuous change, what people call resilience,
Yeah.
that seems like the core non-financial muscle we really need to build and actively maintain.
Resilience is absolutely paramount. The Employee Fitness Report, the EFR, they highlight that resilience involves several things. The ability to manage unexpected change, the willingness to remain curious and committed to learning new things throughout life, the capacity to successfully bounce back from inevitable setbacks, and also proactively maintaining hope even when things feel uncertain. And think about it. If your primary method for coping with stress during your career was simply to throw yourself deeper into work, well, that coping mechanism is gone post-FI. You're forced to find healthier, more sustainable ways to adapt.
Okay, so before we can even start drafting the blueprint for this fulfilling life, we really need to understand our own default relationship with change. We need to do some deep introspection first.
Exactly. Start by asking yourself these two really critical questions. And they apply just as much to navigating career changes as they do to retirement shifts. First, how do you typically react emotionally and behaviorally to change? Do you tend to panic, deny it, resist it? Or do you tend to lean in, maybe view it as a challenge or an opportunity? Be honest with yourself.
Okay, and the second question.
Second, what are some proactive ways you can begin to think, feel, and behave differently right now to reflect greater resilience? What small steps can you take? This kind of introspection builds the self-awareness that's absolutely necessary to successfully navigate the inevitable shifts retirement will bring, whether those shifts are physical, relational, financial, or something else entirely.
Right. Now let's move to the blueprint questions. The ones aimed specifically at replacing that lost worker identity we talked about earlier. We need some really tangible prompts for the listener to start filling in the blanks of their future non-financial life, moving beyond just the superficiality of a job title.
Okay, so the central challenge in retirement, as we said, is replacing those three foundational functions work often provided: identity, structure, and a sense of worth or usefulness. We have to be proactive in addressing this potential identity gap. The three core strategic questions for retirement readiness, drawing from that EFR framework, are these.
Okay, number one.
First, how will you answer the question, who are you, when you retire? This requires consciously cultivating qualities, values, experiences that endure completely independent of your job title. You need to redefine success and purpose away from those external accolades, the corner office, the big promotion, the fancy title, and towards intrinsic fulfillment, like I am a caring spouse, I am an avid gardener, I am a dedicated community mentor.
This forces us to move past those maybe more superficial notions of self that we clung to during our careers and really reacquaint ourselves with deeper, more fundamental truths about who we are, like the Forbes sources suggested.
Exactly. Okay, the second core question is about the container for your time. How will you structure your days? You must consciously plan routines, rituals, maybe daily or weekly goals that replace the mandated external schedule of the working life. This isn't just about what time will I wake up. It's more like what self-imposed purpose and direction will guide the first few hours of my day.
Right, having a default plan. And the third question gets at that intrinsic value, that need we all have to feel useful.
Precisely. The third question is, what specific things will you do to feel useful? This is about ensuring you have a consistent sense of worth that comes from contribution, not compensation. This might be formal volunteering, sure, but it could also be becoming a mentor, taking on a new caregiving role for an elderly relative, or maybe engaging in a massive, personally meaningful project like writing that book you always talked about, or building your own furniture, or restoring an old car. The feeling of being needed, of contributing something, is a powerful antidepressant.
Okay. And while we're building this blueprint for self-management, identity, structure, usefulness, we also have to simultaneously and seriously consider our social architecture, our relationships. We tend to drastically underestimate how much of our social life, just our casual network, is tied directly to the workplace.
Oh, massively.
When you retire, those daily water cooler chats, those team lunches, the after-work drinks, they just vanish. Poof.
And that disappearance of casual, frequent social interaction, it has enormous consequences for long-term satisfaction and even health. The research on this is absolutely clear and, frankly, quite shocking to many people. A strong, diverse social network is necessary for retirement satisfaction. And get this, it is, in fact, a greater predictor of happiness than either wealth or health.
Wait, say that again. A strong social network is a greater predictor of happiness in retirement than wealth or health.
That's what the data suggests. It's staggering, isn't it?
That is staggering. More important than the size of your portfolio or even your physical wellness. That implies we should be investing serious time and proactive effort into our non-work relationships now, not waiting until later.
It absolutely demands immediate action. Good relationships, deep connections, they take effort and time to build and maintain. That optionality you gain from pursuing FI, it must be explicitly used to invest in these relationships now, while you still maybe have the shared context of a working life with some people.
So what's the actionable question here?
You need to honestly assess your current network. Ask yourself, what percentage of my current my regular interactions is strictly job-related? And then, the crucial follow-up. What can you do today to start building or enriching a social network entirely independent of your job? Join a club, take a class, start a community group, volunteer somewhere, reconnect deeply with distant friends or family. Make it a priority.
Okay. This deep dive has given us so much to chew on, but the goal here is always immediate action, right? So let's try and wrap this up with a simple framework, a way for listeners to apply these insights into actionable steps they can take, starting like tomorrow.
Absolutely. This simple action plan framework, sometimes it's called the stop, start, continue model. It just helps you codify your next steps based on everything we've discussed today. So we encourage you, grab a piece of paper or open a note and fill in these blanks for yourself. I will begin doing. What new action will you take? Maybe it's, I will dedicate 30 minutes every day to cultivating a flow hobby. Or, I'll start researching local volunteer opportunities this week. Or, I will schedule one new non-work social connection per week. Be specific.
Okay, begin doing. What's next?
Next, I will stop doing. What mindset or behavior will you consciously leave behind? Perhaps I will stop thinking of FI as an all-or-nothing race. Or I will stop delaying that trip I can actually afford right now. Or maybe I will stop relying entirely on my job title for my sense of self-worth.
Powerful. Okay, and the last one.
And finally, I will continue doing. What positive habits or actions already in place will you commit to maintaining? It could be, I will continue my core savings rate towards my goals. Or I will continue my daily physical activity routine. Or I will continue dedicating intentional screen-free time to my family. Acknowledge what's working. #tag as a hydro.
Wow. This has been an incredibly rich and I think really necessary deep dive into the power of non-financial planning for anyone on the FI journey, or even just contemplating a major life change, to try and synthesize the major takeaways. Financial independence isn't a finish line. It's a flexible continuum. It grants empowering optionality long before full retirement. And you absolutely should leverage those earlier milestones like Coast to FI or semi-retirement to start designing a better, more fulfilling life now.
And crucially, the data strongly suggests that the largest determinant of your actual post-FI satisfaction isn't going to be the final number in your portfolio. It's the depth of your non-financial preparation.
Right.
We have to consciously design our lives now to ensure future fulfillment. And that means proactively defining a robust sense of purpose beyond work, actively creating structure to replace the external demands of a job, engaging regularly in flow-inducing activities that bring intrinsic reward, and diligently, intentionally building a strong social network that sustains you far beyond the office walls.
So if you've been laser-focused purely on hitting that magical dollar amount, just remember, financial security simply gives you the permission slip to pursue meaning. But that pursuit itself requires effort, requires intentional design, and it needs to start today. Money buys optionality, purpose buys happiness.
Well said. And maybe here's a final provocative thought for everyone listening to consider, something that really drives home the necessity of starting this preparation immediately. Studies consistently show that individuals who leave the workforce involuntarily, maybe due to unexpected health problems, sudden layoffs, maybe a family crisis forces them out, those individuals are significantly less likely to have made any non-financial preparations beforehand.
Because they didn't see it coming.
Exactly. So ask yourself this tough question. If you were forced to retire completely involuntarily tomorrow, what non-work-related facet of your identity are you actively nurturing today that would immediately preserve your sense of self, provide structure, and offer fulfillment? What's your anchor outside of work? Start building that anchor today, right now, before you ever actually need it.